What I want to talk about is sketchbooks that used to be available for collecting at various conventions from different artists. So this one here is from an artist named Francis Manipal, which I got I think I got this in like 2007 or 2008, but it's his 2006 sketchbook. And basically I would just go around a convention and collect as many of these things as I can find, because it was sort of like the artists were giving away all of their process and sort of how they work, and you were getting some invaluable information about the way that they work. This one actually included a sketch. Well, actually, I don't know if that's a sketch from the artist, but they made 500 of these, and this was number 311, and then they signed it. So it's a limited run. It was cool, but you would see just their warm-up sketches and just the way that they work, their style. And sometimes collecting work like this was much more interesting to me than collecting finished prints, because, again, you get to see sort of their process and kind of how they think, and not just that, perfect finished print that you would, hang up on a wall somewhere. So I would go around. Most artists do not offer sketchbooks anymore. It was a really cool thing that was happening in the late 90s, early 2000s. Just kind of faded out, I guess. There really wasn't any, I guess there was no money in it for artists, and now it became cheaper for people just to make their own books, so they didn't have to find a cheap alternative to being able to sell their own personal little book. But again, I thought these were really cool, so I must have probably 50 of these things from various artists. One of my more important ones to me, because this one was signed by Jim Lee, so this is the Jim Lee signed version of the All-Star Batman Superman situation that he was working on, and this was when, I think it was in the earlier years when he had just kind of started getting into the DC universe. Mm-hmm. Jim Lee being one of my favorite artists. Again, just seeing the pencil lines and the way his process, the way that he worked, and then him working on these different properties that you normally wouldn't see. Here's some of his Wildcats stuff, his IP when he was working for Wildstorm. And, the Jim Lee that we know now is DC. I mean, he's one of the higher-up executives at DC, but at the time, when he started, he was actually he was a Marvel artist. So here he's combining some Marvel and DC characters. But again, this is showing the process. It's sort of like the rough idea of how an artist works, which is, again, more valuable than looking at finished pieces and studying that, because it's just so polished. Here you can see their mark making, their unique way of approaching their work. So when it's rough, you can still see how they're kind of planning out thumbnails, and then where they end up with a finished piece that is then inked and colored. So sketchbooks, if you can find them, you'd want to pick up as many of these as possible. So like I said, these are not super popular anymore. You don't see them very readily, but they were my favorite thing to collect when I was going to conventions as a fan. Even as an artist, if I have time at a show, I'll leave my table and I would go around and try to get as many of these as I possibly could. So when I started, I could still find some of these, so I would kind of run through the show and buy as many of these as possible. And artists were selling these from anywhere between $5 and $25, depending on who the artist was. The more expensive ones obviously were for people that were a little bit more established. Another example of a sketchbook. This one was a little bit more, one of the more elaborate ones that I would find, and what this artist would do, Andy, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but he's done quite a bit of work for some major publications. These really intricate drawings that were done with pen, and it's just a crazy amount of detail and attention to detail. So of course I had to have these, and I don't know how many of these he had, but I would get the new one every year that he had them. So I think there was 2 or 3 of these that I know of that I own. and these were a bit more expensive, so they were printed out on some decent paper, and then they were actually put into one of these portfolios, and I think he was selling these in the area of $20 a piece at the time. I think they may be a little bit more than that now, if he's still even doing these. But just some really great stuff that I would use as a study guide. So these things function kind of as my textbook. And then the last sketchbook here is another one of my favorite comic book artists, Scott Campbell, who is known for creating Danger Girl. And there's a page with Danger Girl, and then this is also a signed copy. This is more of a book. I mean, this is actually a legitimate publication here. You know, it kind of takes the idea of a sketchbook and takes it to the next level. So you're still getting the process, you're still seeing the pencil lines and the ink lines, and you're seeing that rough stage, you're seeing the planning stages, but you're getting this in a way higher quality book. These, I'm not sure how much they are, but somewhere between $20 and $30 a piece. So I don't have a ton of these. I think I was at a show, and it depends if I'm making any money there, and I have a little bit to where I could spend on myself, you know, once I've covered my expenses and I've gotten to a point where I feel pretty good about the amount that I've been able to make at a show, I'll go around and collect books and things from various artists that I admire, that inspire me. So I get a lot of really great information from these. So if you're ever looking to study how another artist approaches a subject that you're interested in this case comic books, sketchbooks are a great way to do that. So I will places where you can click and get yourself a sketchbook. I'll see if I can't link up to some of these just because I recommend them, and I think I would recommend, if you have the means, to pick up at least one of these things if this is something that you're interested in looking at and studying and adding to your collection. All right, so that's just going to be a short video for right now. Again, I'm trying to get through some of the different categories of art books that I have. Last time we talked about inspiration. This time is sort of a carrying on that conversation. In this case, we're talking about sketchbooks. Next time, we're going to talk about some of the books that I found useful when I was starting to kind of train and improve and hone my skills. Some that I had when I was a young kid, and then others I had in my teenage years, and then into college and beyond. So I mean, even now I'm still picking up books that I think are going to help me get to the next level, achieve what I'm trying to achieve with my own artwork. Thanks for watching, and I will see you for the next video. Bye.
Thanks for watching. Like, there's like a little button that they put on the laptop or something, and then they say click it, and then you can never even miss a video.
That's if you subscribe.